He did this in the Pirates turn-based combat, and we just thought it was fantastic. So we had to implement it for Civ 4. Also, unit flags are now on the map. Well, first of all, now that we have multi-units, it means the units are smaller, so you can see less of their team color. But this was a problem anyway that kept coming up in gameplay sessions. People weren't sure whose unit was which, so we're like, well, let's slap a flag down there. Let's make it really obvious to people whose unit is whose. As you see, we've changed the terrain palette. It's much more subdued now, much less saturated, much less in your face. This was sort of an important art change. Sid was involved in this, in that he helped us remind ourselves that the units are the most important thing on the map, not the terrain. The terrain shouldn't be hogging the attention, so to speak. You see, we have tile-based coastlines. We still have. It's still pretty obvious now. What's land and what's water, but you see we actually have the beginnings of a system that doesn't look terrible, where you can see sort of the coastlines curve, and how the tiles come together. There's sort of this almost 2D system of interlocking pieces that come together that makes it look good in 3D. This was a system that Dorian was very closely involved with in banging out, getting all the tiles to fit together. We have a prototype animated leader head in place at this point. Which is interesting because this is very late. This is something people noticed right off the bat with Civ 4. Is like, wow, those leaders look great. It's great to see Napoleon. It's great to see Gandhi in action. But it was something that really was only done in the last third of the project.
And a lot of that is because we had prototyped so long with such a small team. Those leader heads really take a while to make, to really come alive. And we knew who we wanted to make those leaders. We just didn't have them available. So we did a prototype, and once that worked, they could hit the ground running, and they did excellent work overall. Ed Lynch, Mark Shahan, Dennis Mullers, just exceptional work. Ryan Murray,
yeah.
And just great stuff. But it was something that because we had done a little bit of the groundwork, they could come in and really just make the art amazing and not have to worry about solving problems. And the one thing that thrills me about this version is the amount of problems that we were fixing. Like, we have these units, and the unit had to do, there's so much weight on the unit. The unit has to convey health information. The unit has to convey team color information, and all these things. And once we went to multiple units with a flag, we really could convey all that information without having to use bars or text. And I was thrilled that we could start to put a little logo on that flag, and it allowed us to, two people could be red if they wanted to, and one has an eagle, and the other has, a crown, and it would be really clear who they were playing. So at this point, I felt like we had finally solved some of the really big symbology problems on the way. Like the icon, putting icons in the font was sort of like the first step of that. And at this point, we really didn't have any more questions about where's the iconography of the game going. It was really a question of how good can we make that look. We also have our first main pass at the interface here, trying to make a step towards some sort of finalized interface. It was going to change a lot before we shipped, but we wanted sort of one version that we thought was an attempt at making it look good, more than just functional. We also have our dynamic tech tree in place right now, which is a really nice thing. It was something that actually I didn't think would actually work, but I was proved wrong. There was a lot of people who really hoped that we could have something like this, where basically the game sort of just naturally figures out where the technology should go on the tech tree. It's not something that's hard-coded, which is a really great thing for modders, and it was really awesome to see that in action. So now I want to talk a little bit about the AI, because this is the part of the project where I'm spending most of my time working on this. It's something that's not easy to prototype because it's so complicated, and it's so involved that you don't want to work on it right off the bat. Especially because the AI really kind of follows the game rules. If you come up with one game rule, then you write a bunch of AI to take advantage of it early on in the project, that game rule might eventually just get taken out entirely, and then you've just wasted your time working on some AI for a rule that doesn't exist. So you really want to finish the game before you start working on the AI. Now, of course, usually that's not really feasible. You have to do some sort of find some sort of middle ground, where one sort of fades into the other. But the basic point here is that you should focus on your AI during the second half of a project. It's really hard to, as far as for testing the AI,
traditional testing is really hard here. You can't sort of ask for traditional QA people to tell you whether your AI is working or not, because what they're worried about is sort of real, literal questions about functionality. Does the stealth bomber work? Does combat work? Does research work? Et cetera, et cetera. As long as the AI doesn't, not build any cities or something, as far as they're concerned, the AI works. It's just a question of, is it any good or not? And that's why you really need hardcore fans to analyze this. Our testing group that we pulled from the outside was really, our #1 weapon tool to figure out whether the AI was where it was needed to be. Automated testing helps a lot here as well. Every night I would leave my machines running, have an AI game going on in the background where the AI was playing itself just to see how it did. You just have to use, be creative, figure out all the different ways to test out to see how your AI algorithms are doing. But it's very important when you develop AI to never forget that fun comes first. You're not really interested in beating the player. That's not really the important thing. The important thing is that the player has fun and the AI is a compelling opponent. That it does interesting things that challenge the player, but you're not looking to just completely wipe them off the map. And in regard of that, we had like 9 difficulty levels in Civ 4, which was way more than we've ever had in Civ before. We really wanted people to be able to find a difficulty level that was appropriate for them. And really with difficulty levels, to some extent, the more the better. Okay, now we're up to April 2005. This is a version that's just a few months away from E3. So there's a lot of graphical pressure on us right now to make the game look good. Really not a lot of gameplay stuff going on right now, just tweaks really. There's an auto explorer feature, but not much to talk about here. I'm mostly working on AI, but the graphics and art team is working very hard to make the game look good. Prototype art is disappearing. You're starting to see, sort of finalized buildings and units start to appear. We have finally a first sort of official final animated leader head. It was Gandhi, which people probably saw in a lot of our promotional art because he was available at this point. Some final button art is appearing where people, finally have, nice, engaging, and accurate pictures of units and buildings. The button art is very important in Civ 4. It's important because it's like kind of a window into the game. It's your first direct contact with everything that you can make in the game. Final improvement art is now appearing, in your mines and your pastures and your windmills. So makes the world really come alive. We tweaked the unit graphics. There's now 5 units instead of 4. We liked that sense of a lot of people on the map. We have Civ-specific flags, where the America is a star, China is a dragon. This type of thing was very nice to tie the flags to civilizations. Another graphical improvement that we were really excited about, in fact we had wanted in the game since Civ 3, and it was nice to finally see it in action, was a natural border system where the borders sort of fit together, sort of flowed naturally around the terrain. They weren't squarish anymore. They even followed along the rivers, which was a really neat effect. And of course, people see that and they know that happened all the time in world history itself. We have a moving towards a tile-based terrain system. All this time we'd kind of tried to resist that. We had this sort of naturalized terrain system where tiles could be sort of half grassland or half plains. Just wasn't much fun. People wanted to understand what was going on, understand their environment. So now, a tile is either plain or grassland or ice or tundra or desert. We committed to having each tile be just one thing. That also ran the risk of making the game look a little blocky, but we were going to take it and just see what the artists could do with it. There are sort of improved rivers and coasts. We're just sort of iterating on that now. We know we committed to the concept of making the coasts clear whether a tile was land or water, and so now we're just iterating on trying to make it look good. You can see we have some nice sort of sandy beaches that show up. We also have a final font in place here, one that we thought was much more appropriate to a Civ game. The early Civilopedia is in place right now, where we have the first screens now, and we're just we'll slowly add more as we go along. There is a foreign advisor screen, a religion advisor screen. We're starting to pick up steam with working on Python, using Python to create the advisor screens for us. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about the evolution of the coastline. You know, we've talked about this some already as we've moved forward. As we start